Welcome to Garden Success with Skip Richter, the show designed to help you have a bountiful garden and a beautiful landscape. Call in now with your lawn and garden questions at 979-845-5689 or email your questions to gardensuccess@tamu.edu. And now, Texas A&M AgriLife Extension horticulturist Skip Richter.
Well, hello, and welcome to Garden Success. We are glad you're listening today, and I just want to say up front, while we are normally a call-in show, today I'm coming to you by tape. So just sit back, hope you enjoy the show, and we'll be back live here again. I just needed to be out involved in something else with my AgriLife Extension horticulture job, and so we're going to come by tape today. I've got a number of things I'd like to talk about. I think some of them are directly related to the season we're in, and some are just, I think, kind of evergreen, as we say, meaning they would apply to pretty much any month of the year that we're talking about. I want to start off and talk a little bit about gardening in containers, and the reason is this. I think everybody ought to enjoy growing things. I just think that's wired into us to be out there, be part of nature, be part of the rhythm of the seasons, and we certainly know that when it comes to our health, we don't eat enough fresh fruits and vegetables. We eat too much fast food that's fried and greasy and other things, and just directly related to issues such as heart disease, for example, just one of many things that can be affected by that. And I think gardening is a remedy for a lot of that. Now, I realize you're going down the road and you're going to pull into a fast food restaurant. You don't have time to run back to the garden and grab a turnip. But I'm just talking about growing your own food. And when you grow your own food, number one, you can control what is or is not used on your food. Meaning, if you don't want food that's been sprayed with anything, well, grow it yourself, and you'll suffer the losses sometimes that come with not using a pesticide to control issues, but you get to decide. Also, when you grow your own food, it's fresher. I used to say it's about 1,500 miles fresher, meaning that instead of being shipped halfway across the country, it's coming right from your backyard, and I just enjoy that. That is one of the reasons that I like to garden. I enjoy just experiencing the learning process. And I've been doing this my whole life, actually. I had a garden in our family property when I was a child. My mom was the main one that did the gardening, but of course I was out there having to help and work. And the way I like to tell it is whenever I misbehaved, I had to go out and pull weeds. And we had the most weed-free garden in town, so you can make of that what you want. But nevertheless, somehow I still ended up as a horticulturist, despite the pain and suffering I experienced as a child, pulling weeds in the garden. Anyway, but gardening, it's exercise too. It gets you outside, it's fresh air, and we've had Dr. Charlie Hall on this show before, just talking about the benefits to mental and even physical health of just seeing plants, of just touching plants, of just walking, through nature. And gardening is certainly at the heart of all of this. So I would like to try to convince more people to try to grow some things. And if you think you have a brown thumb, let me assure you, you don't. You have an uninformed thumb. Now, all you need is to give your thumb some education, and it turns miraculously green. That's right. Now, some people just have a hint, They have a knack for doing the right thing and growing plants. Maybe they picked it up somewhere, maybe they just got lucky, or maybe it just makes sense to them. And so, they appear to have a green thumb, but they're doing the right things. That's why plants are growing right. When your soil is right, when you choose varieties that are adapted, when you plant them on time, when you take care of them to prevent stress, whether it's water stress or a lack of nutrients, compacted soil, whatever the stress is, when you prevent that, you're on your way to success, because you've put them in a place that has good drainage or doesn't, or you've made it a good drainage place by building up a raised bed. You put them in a place that gets sunlight or shade or some variation in between, and the plants definitely will have an opinion about that. And so all it takes is understanding those principles, and that's just a matter of learning. You have to. It's learning over time. I've quoted, I believe it was J.C. Ralston, that said, in order to be a good horticulturist, you have to kill a lot of plants, and that is so true. Don't be afraid to try something out. We have, and I've used this analogy on the air before, but some of you remember Etch-a-Sketches, where you try to draw things with two little wheels, one up and down, one sideways, and inevitably, as you're trying to draw something, when you're intending to go right, you end up going left or up and down, and you just have messed up your picture. And so what did you do? You picked up the Etch-a-Sketch, held it up upside down, and shook it. And when you brought it back down, you had a blank slate, and you get to start over. And I would say that the equivalent of holding your garden upside down and shaking it is a spading fork or a rototiller. It's no problem pulling plants out and just going back to the beginning and starting over. Every season is new. Every season is different. And each time you just get better and better. And that thumb gets greener and greener. And that's why we're here on Garden Success, to help turn your thumb green. That's why the Aggie Horticulture Department, Extension Horticulture, has a bazillion publications on vegetable gardening and fruit growing and other things at the Aggie Horticulture website. And if you've not gone to aggie-horticulture.tamu.edu, you need to. That is a wealth of free information. And by the way, the Extension or AgriLife bookstore is also online, and this isn't a store where you go buy a bunch of books. This is a store where you're able to go, and most things are free. Now, there are a few things that they're going to have to mail you some book or something like that. Yeah, you're going to have to pay for that, but in general, this is free. It's free stuff. And so let's say you want a publication, and it wouldn't just have to be gardening. They have stuff on, pests of the pantry and everything else you can imagine. But you can just go there and you can look it up, and that is so helpful. It's just again, read those publications to your thumb and watch it turn green as you do, and you'll get better and better and better. And people will think you just have a knack, but what you have is good information. I would say that university research-based information, which is what we do here at Texas A&M, that kind of information will guide you into a direction where you have success, because it's been proven. When you get onto social media, oh my goodness, whoever wants to have an opinion, and especially, maybe shore up their self-image with a little bit of I'm the expert activity. You've seen those kind of folks online too. That is not good information. It'll lead you wrong. I've seen stuff like one of the funniest ones is, and I won't tell the source of it, even though I probably should, just because it's ridiculous that they put that out there. Is that if bell peppers have 4 lobes, they're one gender. If they have 3 lobes, they're the other. And I can't remember which is male and which is female, 3 lobes or 4 lobes or whatever. It doesn't matter, because it's absolutely ridiculously bonked. That's just a genetic difference in the peppers that causes them to have 3 or 4 lobes. And think about this. A pepper is an ovary. It's a fruit. It is in and of itself a female, being the fruit and of things, but it was pollinated, and so inside that pepper there are going to be seeds, and those seeds could, they're not male or female. If it was a male pepper, how could it have seeds that grow, right? The whole thing is just a massive misunderstanding of anything regarding botany in and of itself. But that's on social media, and there's a lot of other things on social media. I actually collect and save the more ridiculous ones. I saw one the other day that was a tomato, and in one cluster, and I'm talking in just primary bright colors, there was a blue tomato, there was of course an orange and a yellow and a red tomato, and there was even a purple tomato on there. And I mean, when I say purple, I'm not talking about purple-ish. I'm talking about primary color purple. There is no tomato that can produce on one cluster all those colors. There is no tomato that can produce a truly purple tomato. There's no variety of tomato that produce just a absolute sky blue, a little darker than sky blue color, primary color of tomato. It just doesn't happen. Now, I know you see those and you're going to know better than that, but there's a lot of subtle information that can guide you wrong, and that turns your thumb brown when you start seeing and believing that. And so understanding, and I'm kind of on a soapbox here, I'll wind it up, but it is a soapbox irritation for me. Just understanding the difference between evidence-based / research-based information and something that occurred once, and so people think that it works. Your Aunt Mimi, whatever, one time she went out and she put, let me see, what's in the cupboard? Cayenne pepper and oregano. She sprinkled those at the base of her tomato and watered them in and had the best tomato year she's ever had. Okay? Now, that brings us to the subject of causation and correlation. Does correlation mean causation? So hang with me here. If two things occur at the same time, does that mean that one caused the other? Or could it be that they didn't? And we have a lot of interesting correlation versus causation things. Maybe I'll offer you an example of what I'm talking about here in a bit. But that correlation does not always equal causation. In other words, just because you did something to a plant, or maybe your grandmother did, and now everybody believes it in the family, it doesn't mean that that's what caused it. And so I just think having research-based information is important. And I would suggest anytime you are going to do, let's say you are going to do a, I'm trying to think of a good example. Well, let me come back to that. Understanding the difference between, I know what it was. Anytime you're going to do a search on Google or whatever search engine you're using, put what you're looking for and then a space and then the word site, S-I-T-E, a colon, and then .edu. When you tell Google site, S-I-T-E, colon, you're saying, I want you to look for what I just typed. Let's say it's tomato pests. When you look for tomato pests, Google, I only want you to look in sites that, and then whatever comes after the colon, that end in .edu. Or you could put .tamu.edu, Texas A&M University, TAMU.edu. So the first one would only say, I only want you to return me university-based sites. And boy, we're part of the Extension Service, the National Extension System, and every state has its land-grant college where ag research is done. And so you're narrowing down to that kind of thing. When you put .tamu.edu, you're saying, I just want you to look around A&M and give me an answer to this. And that's more local, and so that would be better. But if you'll just do that one simple little thing, you will cut through all of the commercial stuff, all the claims about this or that or the other, all the opinions out there, and it'll take you right to really good information, good information. I think that finding and utilizing sites like that is something that everybody should be able to do. I was talking earlier about correlation and causation, correlation and causation not being the same thing. And there is I have several little graphs that somebody else put together, and one of them is a graph that it compares Nicolas Cage films, the number he appears in each year, to the number of people who drowned in a swimming pool. And these two lines just absolutely, they correlate. When one goes up, the other goes up. When it goes down, the other goes down. So obviously, here's what we need to do. We got to get Nick to quit making movies because people are dying because of it, right? Of course not. That's the difference between correlation and causation. And people that don't think in a research-based way, they're going to be very moved by correlation, and they don't have a way of maybe figuring out as causation the same thing. Here's another one. The number of letters in the winning word at the Scripps National Spelling Bee correlates perfectly with the number of people killed by venomous spiders. The number of people killed by venomous spiders. So here's the deal. Someone, if any of you have contacts with the National Scripps Spelling Bee, plead with them to just shorten the letters in that final word. I mean, people are dying, right? So, okay. Anyway, that's what I'm talking about. Is that not ridiculous? Of course it is. It's absolutely ridiculous. But that's what we get into. All right, well, I started off saying I want more people to garden, and I think everybody should experience enjoying plants. One of the challenges to gardening is the lack of space. By and large, if you want to have a garden, you need good sunlight. There are plants that grow in the shade. You can have a shade garden. But by and large, you want flowers, you want vegetables, you want fruit. It's going to take some sun to do that. So what if you live in a place and you don't have room? What if you live in a high-rise and you don't have any place? You just got a concrete patio outside. What if you live in an older neighborhood and now the trees have grown into such large, beautiful shade trees that it's hard to find a ray of sunshine hitting the ground anywhere? So what do you do about that? You do containers. Containers are easy. And I want to talk about some aspects of success with containers. And number one is, what kind of container would you choose if you wanted to grow flowers or vegetables, or maybe a small dwarf type of a citrus or a hibiscus, something like that? What kind of container would you choose? Well, there's several types out there. Of course, there's wooden containers. They tend to rot out pretty fast. You see the little ones that they look like they may be made of cedar wood, but they're probably not. Those types. There's plastic containers that are very lightweight, but kind of flimsy. And when you have a plastic container and the soil gets dry, that soil mix or media, technically the media inside, shrinks away from the sides of the container. And now it's dry, but when you water it, the water runs down the outside. So it's kind of hard to get the container re-wet again from that. Terracotta containers tend to hold onto the soil. It doesn't pull away, but terracotta is hot. It loses its water really fast. I was getting ahead of myself. It loses its water by wicking from the sides in addition to what goes up through the plant and out the surface of the soil. And so that's a terracotta issue. Then there's beautiful glazed pottery, and those containers are just gorgeous. So that would be a nice thing, but they're very heavy and they're very expensive compared to some of these other types of containers. There's a type that I've always liked, and that is the what do they call it? It's kind of a plasticky foam material. And I can't think of the specific, I want to say polycarbonate, that's not right. Anyway, those kind of containers may look like they're made out of stone or terracotta because of the coloring and the painting and everything on them. But they're lightweight. They're feather light. You just drill some holes in the bottom and you have a beautiful container. And I like those for that reason. I think that they're also kind of insulated and with that plasticky material around the sides. So those are some options. Then there's metal containers. That's the one I was saying would get very hot. I've got a couple of the old giant kettles that people used to make homemade soap in. Those giant things that have hooks for hanging over the fire. And I love those containers. They're rusty. They'll last forever. But boy, it gets hot on the side of that cast iron container in the summer. And if you were to pull plants out of a container like that, you would find the roots on the sun side are browning. It literally kills the roots for some distance in. And you can grow plants in them. I do every summer. But that's just the drawback to them. So pick a container that you can handle. Think about the size of the container. Most things we want to grow, you're going to need at least a 3 to 5 gallon container. So if you were going to grow lettuce and carrots and And cool season greens, you can get by with even smaller than 3-gallon container. You just want it to be, if it was carrots, to be deep enough for the roots to be able to form. But a container like that works really well and is easy. And in the cool season, you don't have to water so much because it's not hot, and the plants aren't using water at the same rate as they are when things are warmer. If you are looking for something in the cool season, think about that. I've even taken the big trays, they're flat and shallow, and you put them underneath containers. But I'm talking about big ones that are maybe, I don't know, 16 inches or more across, and they're probably 3 or 4 inches deep. And I've put soil in those and grown greens, like sprinkle lettuce, different varieties. Just sprinkle it around the container, water it, and it'll come up. You got to water regularly, but you can grow. And what you do then is you take scissors and just mow off your lettuce like you harvested it with a combine, and take it in and make your salad, and it'll resprout and come up and grow in there. You can do that. You can absolutely do that. But for most things, especially when we get into warmer weather, 5 gallons is a good starting place. For tomatoes, for example, a small tomato, meaning the stature of the plant is small, in a 5-gallon container, if you don't forget to water it for a single day, it can be successful. If you get up to 10 gallons, then tomatoes become even easier to grow. And there are a lot of different kinds of containers. One other kind of container that I didn't mention a while ago that I should add are the fabric bags, and they're popular right now, and they last a good while. Just think of like a felt, I guess, would be a fair comparison, but it's not felt. That some of them have handles. You can pick them up and move them around, and they're very simple. You buy them and they're all folded up, and you just unfold it. Think of a pillowcase almost that you're filling with soil, and that's what it amounts to. So lots of good containers to do that. The second is the soil. When you want to have success with a container, you need to make sure and use a quality soil. A lot of times when you go someplace to buy soil, the cheapest one is not what you want to buy, because when you open it up, it's supposed to be almost potting soil, and you open it up and it's got all these chunks of wood in it, and that is not a good blend. You want something that is a good blend that has organic material. It used to always be peat moss. Sometimes now coconut coir is used in the mixes. Sometimes composted type materials are. And then you need things, of course that holds water, then you need things to help the drainage, and they'll put perlite and vermiculite in. Perlite's the little white things that float to the top of the container over time that you see. That is a mined mineral, by the way, with lots of pore space. Sometimes people will use things like expanded shale, but that's normally for the ground as opposed to containers to improve drainage. But a blend of those things is important, and you use a quality mix. It has to drain well, and so you need to make sure your container has drainage holes. Inside with houseplants, if you really are careful and smart about how you water, you can get by without drainage holes in your houseplant pots. But when we get outside, it's just not, you can't do it. And I won't go into all the reasons why, but it will fail on you in time. So the drainage holes are critical. Sometimes they're not enough, and you can drill some additional ones. It's a little 1/4-inch bit and just run the drill over them. Sometimes I'm using things for a container that aren't made for gardening. The little oval galvanized containers that are more like, I don't know, you would see them in a farm store. Drilling holes in the bottom of those. You can put a little piece of the soft window screen fabric down in there over it so the water doesn't wash out of the holes in the soil. Sometimes in pots, I'll just put a couple of coffee filters in the bottom, and yeah, they'll rot away. But for a while, it helps hold the soil until it kind of becomes a little more firm and less likely to wash out of the bottom of the hole. Location is very important. Again, sunlight. And this doesn't mean every container needs to be in full sun. Some plants, vegetables and flowers, they actually benefit from a break from the blazing hot mid-afternoon sun. The hottest time of the day is about 4 o'clock around here in the summer times. And So anything from like 1 to 4, some shade during that time is probably helpful, especially in the latter part of that time. Just don't go below 6 hours if it produces roots, fruit, or flowers. If your reason for growing it is roots, fruit, or flowers, don't go under 6 hours for best success. So location, location. The nice thing about containers with location is you could have a container along the driveway. You could have a container in this one little spot out there that gets a little bit of sun. I mean, it's easy to move the containers around. And by the way, when you're moving them, don't try to pick them up. They get heavy. And as you stoop and pick up something heavy, well, let's just put it this way. You don't want to put your chiropractor's kids through college. So here's how you move containers. You get you a dolly, or some people call them a hand truck. You slide the lip underneath the container, and you put a strap from one side of the dolly around the container and then to the other side of the dolly to hold that container firmly up against the dolly itself. And then when you tilt it back, I mean, it's almost like you're moving the container with 2 fingers. You get the balance right, and it's very easy to do. And I've done this a million times, and it's great for, let's say you're growing a little citrus plant like a lime tree, just as an example, in a container that are not cold hardy. But you can run that thing into the garage whenever we're going to go below freezing, and it'll be just fine. And I mentioned hibiscus, the tropical hibiscus. I've got one of those in a large container that is going to head into the garage once we get a true freezing night coming along. So location and being able to move the container, that's really important. The container size, the reason that we want larger sizes is because the entire root system of the plant is confined to the soil mix in that container. So if you take a tomato, I just keep using tomatoes as examples, but it's a good one. If you take a tomato that gets quite large, for example, and you plant it in the ground, and then if you could excavate and see where all the roots are, they're going to be in the surface, definitely the surface foot primarily, but even less than that some, and they're going to go out in all directions, way beyond the plant. That tomato is mining a wide area of soil for moisture and nutrients. So when times get hard, it's okay. You have to go a good while before it dries out enough to stress that plant. In a container, not so much. All the roots are just filled in the particles of that growing media, the potting soil in the container. And so it takes, on a hot sunny day, big tomato plant, in a small container, like let's say just a 5-gallon container on a large tomato, by the end of the day you're seeing some stress and some wilting. And while that can happen in the summer sun and it then recovers at night, when it's a true moisture lack related stress, it doesn't recover at night because there's not moisture there at night when it needs to get it. Just in the garden, maybe they couldn't keep up and they wilted a little during the day, and then they managed to pump enough water to catch back up. But in a container, no. And every time that happens, you're losing production. That you may have some blooms abort. You may have some fruit that's already on the plant start to develop blossom end rot, those little brown things that make the whole fruit ruined on the end of the tomato. Do you see what I'm saying? So we want a big tomato, a pot, so that when we grow our tomatoes, we're not dependent on having constantly to water those things. I want to talk a little bit about when you plant them. You plant them, any plant, just like you would out in the garden at the same depth that it was growing before. If it's lanky, like a tomato, maybe you got a transplant that's kind of lanky, you can lay it over, bury the stem, and leave about 4 inches sticking up, 4 to 6 inches sticking up, depending on how big this plant was. And you can do it that way. But plant them at the same depth that they were before, and then water them in. Now, some potting mixes come with some nutrient already infused into the mix, but that doesn't last. And so when you put a tomato in, you can do a couple things. Number one, you can mix a slow release fertilizer. You could use an organic type fertilizer that isn't a salt base. It's not going to burn the plants. You can put quite a bit of it into the soil mix, and that gets you for a while. There are synthetics like Osmocote is an example of probably the most familiar example, but there's a lot of other brands on the market that are in some sort of a little prill or some other technology that makes those nutrients slowly available over time, sometimes 2, 3, or 4 months. Here in the South, a lot of the ones that say they'll go 3 or 4 months are going to go about 2 or 3 months just because of our soil temperatures and the increased microbial activity and other things going on down there in the soil. But you can mix that in. Otherwise, I would always, when you plant a plant in a container, water it in with a dilute solution of plant food. That could be it could be a synthetic like the ones that dye the water kind of a bluish or greenish color. It could be an organic that is maybe a mixture of seaweed and fish emulsion. That's a combo that works pretty good. Now realize that with the organic you're not getting the nutrient levels that you could with a synthetic, but that still is an option for people that want to garden organically. Water them in real good. I will water them twice more, about 5 days to 7 days apart. So that doesn't mean you're only watering then. It just means with that nutrient solution, just think of it as apply it at planting, apply it a week later, apply it a week after that. And that should do everything you need to get a readily available, immediately available source of nutrients to the plants so they take off growing. Because here's the deal. In order to have flowers and fruit or roots, you need leafy growth that captures the sun. That's how carbohydrates get made. So if your plant is alive and looking okay, but not really growing fast, you're going to get mediocre results in terms of bloom production, fruit production, and so on. But if you keep it growing vigorously, not overdone with nitrogen, but keep it growing vigorously, that's increasing the leaf growth, the shoot growth, the foliage area, and the ability to capture carbohydrates and make that flower that you want, make that tomato or pepper or other fruit that you want, or make that root, whether it's a radish or a carrot. That's those organs that we're eating on those two types of plants, roots and fruit, they are carbohydrate loaded, and so it takes a lot to be able to do well and to do that. And that's the whole reason we're doing it, right? So don't be afraid. Fertilize them along. Make sure that they are actively growing. Another thing about the containers is watering. And I mentioned that a container is a root confining system of growing things. So the water does get pumped dry fast because it has a very small area that it can draw from, water and nutrients. Nutrients, likewise, are going to be limited in a container unless you enhance it with nutrition and keep it growing like we were talking about. But when it comes to watering, we have got to keep a constant moisture on our containers. The bigger the container, the easier that is to do. And when you do that, the plant never lacks for growth. Now, I find that even though I'm a horticulturist, I get busy, I do things, I neglect containers. I do, and that comes at the cost I just mentioned. So I've set up a little hose end with a little hose end timer and a little drip irrigation line that goes along, and a little tube comes up from the line and goes into each container that has a little kind of sprinkler, not a sprinkler, but a bubbler kind of in the containers. It could be drip. And then that timer can be set to come on. It could be set to come on 2 or 3 times a day if you wanted, and to water for a certain amount of time. And that ensures that you're always going to have moist soil in the containers. And you'll kind of have to watch them the first, especially when we get into summer. But you can change the timer. Like right now, you would not need to run every day. Just keep them moist. So I would suggest you do a hose end timer. Those are so inexpensive, so easy to do. And with a little irrigation tubing, which is easy to find, you can kind of play tinker toys, I guess. You just pop it together, and it works. It works really well. I would recommend that. Of course, that requires your containers to all be in the same area, or at least to be able to get a line to them without having a tripping hazard Mine runs along the edge of a patio, and so the line is away from mowers, foot traffic, string trimmers. It's down just about an inch under the soil, and then the lines come up from that into the containers, and the containers are set along the edge of the patio. Works pretty well. So those are some ideas for success. I just think that why not try this winter? Why not make just a salad container? In fact, make 3 or 4 of them. It's just simple. You just put them out there. One of them has lettuce in it. If you like arugula, plant some arugula in one of them. If you like kale, you can have baby kale by growing a bunch of kale seeds, and they're very cold hardy. And it's easy. Spinach the same way. I wouldn't mix species in a container. Most of the time that's not going to work out well. You will see seed companies selling something called mesclun mix, and that's a mix of species. I have found in my gardens here, and I've talked to other gardeners who've tried it, and one species ends up coming up faster, shading out the other, growing faster than the other. Have them in separate containers, and then if you like just a little bit of arugula or a lot of arugula in your salads, then you can mix your salad accordingly just by clipping from different containers. Make sense? Give that a try this winter. One other kind of container, you've heard me talk about it on the show, I'm sure, but that I just love is a wheelbarrow. It started with an old rusty, almost an antique wheelbarrow, and now I have a couple of I have a new metal and a new plastic type of wheelbarrow. I say new, it's a couple years old. Again, drill holes in the bottom, put a good quality mix in there, mound it up so that it's heaped over in the wheelbarrow, just maybe 3 or 4 inches, because as you water and as it settles, it'll end up then at a good level. Maybe 4 is too much in a wheelbarrow, but 3 inches or so. And I think you can have really good success. I've had wheelbarrows, pictures I use when I give talks of a wheelbarrow that has all romaine lettuce, and it's these heads of different colored of romaine type lettuce in one wheelbarrow. So you just go in and you harvest that head of romaine when you're ready to go. Works easy. Another picture has spinach. It's got kale. It's got broccoli. See, it has some lettuce in it. And what else am I forgetting? It had like 4 or 5 or 6 different things growing in one wheelbarrow. And the nice thing about wheelbarrows is you can roll them even easier than moving a container. You can roll them right into the garage on a frosty night. If you need a sunny spot, you can go set the wheelbarrow on your grass. In fact, I did that. I had a wheelbarrow. I had one little sunny spot out in a spot in the yard. I put the wheelbarrow there. When it came time to mow, I'd mow up into the wheelbarrow and then move the wheelbarrow into the mowed area, and then just finish mowing. So it just got like maybe a 3-foot move each time I needed to mow. Works pretty good, and it's a lot of fun, and it gives the neighbors something to talk about. And they need more about you to talk about. So that there you can do it with one easy and nutritionally productive activity of gardening in a wheelbarrow. This winter I'd love to do some of the trailing types and do a flower barrel. I need to actually get that done. Could have been planted a while back, but maybe alyssum draping over the sides. That's a beautiful plant. You could, by the way, you could even throw in a trailing herb like oregano or thyme in one of those. That's a long-lived perennial though. Then you could have other kinds of flowers for cool season. Certainly violas would need to be in there. I would put some snapdragons, the more dwarf types of snapdragons. I would also put some dianthus. There are some cultivars that make tall upright stems, as if it'd be good to use for cutting flowers, but a very tall upright stem. One series is called Amazon. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, just look at Amazon. I say dianthus, Dianthus, and you'll see what I mean by neon colors. That Amazon's not the only series out there. There's others, but that's one of the early ones that is just gorgeous. So there we are. Containers, wheelbarrows, you name it. It's all there. I mentioned the Aggie Horticulture webpage. I also mentioned the AgriLife AgriLife Learn webpage. And if you go to the AgriLife Learn webpage, and in the search bar, you type frost and landscape, those two words. I'm checking it here to make sure I'm telling you the truth. Well, I know you got to search down for. Okay, let me try a different thing. Let's say frost and plants. I can't remember the way this search engine is not at all intuitive like Google. It's frustrating. Okay, I'm going to find what it is and come back to that topic in just a moment. Anytime you're planting things, you want to keep in mind the planting dates. If you go to the Master Gardener's website here in Brazos County, you can find the plant guide by going to the edible plant section. And the plant guide it's a calendar, and the it's arranged like a checkerboard. So on the column on the left, you have all the vegetables you would want to grow, and across the top is January through December. And then there's bars. It's like start planting here. This is an okay time, and then it gets to, from a light green, it turns dark green for this is the best time. And then, of course, at the end, there's a little light green section because, it's not like you cannot plant on October 31st, but you can on November 1st. That's, of course, not how nature works. But if you will go and download that, it's free, and it's you can just save it to your computer, do whatever you want with it. It is very, very helpful. And that one, again, that's not on the AgriLife Learn page. It's on the Brazos, Brazos, I always can't remember if it's .org. I believe it's brazosmg.org. I'll check that out and make sure. But it's free and it's easy. Brazosmg.com, sorry, that's where you find it. It's easy, and it guides you in the right planting dates. And this is important. You want to plant your plants at the right time. And we have here a kind of unique climate in that we do have some freezes that are hard to figure out when they're going to occur because it can be random. We can go through winter and barely have a freeze, and we can go through winter and have a lot of horrendous extended periods of freeze. And so I usually joke and say that winter is 3 days of the year. We just don't know which 3 days. That's kind of how it ends up being. And by planting at the right time, so we come into spring, we got this window, and then it's going to get blazing hot, and our tomatoes are not going to set fruit well, the large fruited types. So when you plant, if you wait until when you plant, and maybe you're from the Midwest and you plant when you planted in the Midwest, well, you're not going to get hardly anything in the way of tomatoes, because about the time they would set tomatoes, it gets too hot to set tomatoes. And so it's a disappointment. But by timing things, that's true. Now, the same thing is true with cool season and warm season flowers. It's really easy to just follow guidelines that tell you when to plant them. And you need to make sure when you're doing this that you are following some sort of a guideline, again, a research-based, hopefully a local guideline like our Brazos County publication is. It's real easy to do. Okay, I want to talk about cultivars too. When you're growing, especially vegetables, not as much with flowers, but when you're growing vegetables, all cultivars aren't the same. There are tomatoes that ripen in 55 days. There are tomatoes that ripen in 80-something days. If you plant a tomato that ripens in over 75 or 78, that's about as far as I would stretch it, and that's stretching it. You're going to either have to get it started early indoors and almost have fruit on it when you put it out in the garden in order to get something, or you're going to be disappointed with the results. We like to have things that move faster here because we have a blazing hot long summer that shuts down a lot of things, and then we've got this sporadic winter and then these spring periods. And you will find that our planting window down south here for some of our crops is similar to the planting window further north, where it stays cold much longer, and by the time the last frost is gone and when the first frost occurs, that's a pretty short period of time. And so down in south here, we got this summer that shuts everything down, and we have a short spring, a short fall, and that works that way too. So anyway, that's just something to think about. If you plant at the right time, you just are going to have better success. And if you use the planting calendars to guide you, that's the way to go. All right, I'm going to go back to my comments about frosts and freezes. The two key words that find you the right publication are frosts and landscapes, because that is two words in the publication: frosts and landscapes. And you will find a publication. It is free. It's called Protecting Landscapes and Horticulture Crops from Frosts and Freezes. That's very, very simple, and it is a 9-page or 8-page publication, full color pictures, color diagrams, and it was written by Dr. Monty Nesbitt and I. Monty is a fruit specialist at Texas A&M AgriLife Horticulture Extension, and I think it's very thorough. In fact, more than you want to know probably about frosts and freezes. It talks about how they occur. There's a difference between a frost and a freeze, and it's not always intuitive to people to think about how and when these occur. There's freezes that are radiative freezes, where the soil or plant surfaces radiate the heat out at night into an open sky, and then there's freezes that come through and it is just very cold, and the wind is blowing, and protecting plants becomes very difficult. But this publication will tell you what you can do, and it goes into a lot of other things. You've probably heard about you should water before a freeze. Well, why is that? Well, it's only moist soil. It's not soggy soil, and it's so that the moisture itself, the liquid water, is going to hold heat better than the soil. Even it just provides. It's like I guess this is way for our time, maybe your time. The people used to heat up like a rock and put it at the foot of the bed to radiate the heat out and keep your feet warm for a little while at night. I've heard of that. Well, this is sort of what you're doing with the soil. You're letting the sun warm it up. It's good moist soil, and then that heat rises up. There are people that spray plants to put ice on them because ice insulates, is what they say. Now, here's a good example of the reason we use site::edu when we search something. If you search freezes, crops, and insulation, for example, and then look for it, you're going to find good information. In our publication, you'll also learn this. Ice does not insulate like we think it does. And this is just a real quick nerd alert here, but when water changes from liquid to solid, that's called freezing. When it changes, each cubic centimeter of water gives off 1 calorie to just change the state from liquid to freezing. By the way, that works in reverse. When it goes from freezing to liquid, it takes in 1 calorie for that part of the change in state, the physics of everything with the water. And so if you may have seen citrus orchards where down low in the plant they have sprinklers, and there's just ice draping off the plant, the branches and things below, that the professional citrus folks are doing. That's what they're doing. But what they have is equipment that puts out just a little bit of water, because you don't want to turn your place into a swamp by running water all night. You don't want to make your plant absolutely break apart because you now have put pounds and pounds of ice on these branches and caused that is a disaster to do. But by putting just a little bit of water and constantly having a thin coating of liquid that is then freezing on the plant, it actually keeps the bud inside and the tissues, the branch tissues inside, from dropping much below freezing, maybe 30. I don't know what, and it depends on the weather, the actual cold that you're dealing with. But most people can't do that. And so once you have turned off the water, that ice temperature and the temperature of your plant tissues is going to drop. it's just going to drop. You only are using ice because you have liquid water continually freezing. So most people create a mess when they try to use water as a way to protect against frost and freezes. That is one aspect of this 8-page publication. Shows you how to cover your plants properly. There's a right and wrong way to do it. Landscape lollipops are the wrong way to do it. It talks about providing heat underneath the cover and safety features, things to consider. So anyway, agrilifelearn.tamu.edu. Do a search for Frost's Landscapes, those 2 words, and it'll be the only thing that pops up. And it's free. Did I say it was free? Yes, you can download it for free. So we're entering the cool season here where we're going to get some frosts and freezes. And our plants vary a lot in terms of their ability to withstand frosts and freezes. Some things, when they go into winter properly and they, as we say, harden off, the plant prepares for the cold, they can take whatever we have in 49 years out of 50 or whatever. They can take that cold, but when they don't harden off properly, they can't take it. And so what about a plant that's marginal? Like Esperanza, the yellow bells. It's a great plant, but in a lot of years, it freezes to the ground, and then it comes back out of the ground. So it's ground hardy, but the top growth can freeze back. Sometimes it partially freezes back and you're left with this ugly plant. If that happens, don't try to keep the above ground alive. Just cut it off the ground and get fresh new shoots out, and you'll be right back in business. Especially if you bought a Gold Star Esperanza, one of our Texas A&M superstar plants. So another one would be Duranta. What do they call it? It's yellow. Gosh, I can't think of the name. It has the yellow berries and the blue flowers. Duranta is very marginal here. Some years fine, some years not. And we have other plants like that. So those would get the attention. Mounding up a little mulch and soil around the base of the plant should we get a really bad winter freeze. That helps protect that base by using the natural warmth in the soil. Our soil is not going to go below 50, at least a few inches down it's not. Here in this area, and we can protect a lot of plants that way. Those of you who lived through the February of 21 freeze where it got down, I'm just going to say 7 degrees, that's what I measured at my house, where it got down that cold, and when we had snow on top, that blanket of snow protected plants that never should have been able to take that amount of cold. That would be our hint on helping out with that kind of thing. I want to also direct you to, on the Ag Horticulture webpage, there is a couple of links that are really, I think, important. There is a section for earth-kind roses, and the earth-kind roses is a list of roses that have been grown under challenging Texas conditions, and they have proven to thrive. So here's what I'm talking about. I was at a planting up in the Dallas area, Dr. Steve George, very, very involved and a leader really in the earth-kind program development. And it was a field full of roses that they went in, they did some soil prep initially, a little bit of soil prep. They planted the roses, they watered them during the first year because, the toughest plant in the world, if it doesn't get water to the roots when it needs it, it's going to die. And so you take a little rose bush and you plant it. Well, remember how we said containers, the roots are confined? They're still right there in that cylinder you pulled out of the pot. And it takes time for them to grow in. So that first year they helped them get established, then they turned off the water. And they only rescue watered during excessive drought. So they could go weeks and weeks, even in the warm temperature, without watering. They did not spray them. They did not do a lot of additional fertilizing or anything after they got them established. And then they watched them. And I have a photo, I wish you could see it, but it's this field full of rose bushes. Some of them are dead. Some of them are greenish but have no blooms. Others are green and are covered with blooms. Now, a plant that can take Texas heat with very minimal help, no spraying, no disease spraying, no insect spraying, that is a Earthkind Rose, and you ought to look at Earthkind roses when you're going to go shopping for roses. Consider that. And it's on the Aggie Horticulture website. The other thing that's on that website is the Texas Superstar program. Now, this is an AgriLife extension program. Actually, the hort science in general, research and extension is part of this program. But the website is texassuperstar.com. Just spell out one word, texassuperstar.com. And when you go there, you can find out all kinds of things about Texas Superstar plants. There are a wide variety. You can find Texas Superstar plants that are annuals, flowers. You can find woody shrubs. You can find trees that are Texas Superstar, perennial flowers that are Texas Superstar. And then they have a category called perennial, and that is a tropical. It would be a perennial in a warmer climate, but we use it as an annual here, or maybe depending on where you're listening, as you go south in Texas, it is a perennial. Duranta's the Brazilian skyflower. That's the plant I was talking about a moment ago. And Pride of Barbados, the Caesalpinia, beautiful, beautiful yellow and reddish orange flowers in the spring. That is an example of a perennial. And then there's even specialty plants. For example, some vegetables, some fruit, so certain kinds of ornamentals, herbs, even tomatoes have been given the Texas Superstar designation. So go check that out. That is absolutely free information that is very, very helpful when you're trying to, have success with your gardening. So we've talked about a number of things today, kind of wandering through, but just keep in mind the idea that why not plant a container when you're growing vegetables or flowers this winter. Get the kids involved. They will so enjoy something that's fast and successful, and greens are that way. They're very fast and easy. Before we go, I just want to remind you that the Texas Tomato Lovers Conference is coming up January 13th at the Antique Rose Emporium. Texas Gardener is putting this on. It is a limited number of seats, and so you need to call and register soon. You can call 254-848-9393 or email Sally at texasgardener.com. There's going to be a wide variety of talks on there. Growing tomatoes with a young family and for a young family. Mastering container grown tomatoes. The best varieties for 2024 of tomatoes, and 8 steps to grafting success. Dr. Ong from our plant pathology lab, the beauty of diseased tomatoes. Does that sound like a pathologist? Beauty and diseased in the same sentence. And I'm going to be talking about the 10 commandments of tomato success. That's the Texas Tomato Lovers Conference, Saturday, January 13th at the Antique Rose Emporium. Again, the number 254-848-9393 in order to register for that event. Don't delay, because these are always popular. Last time they did it, it was standing room only. Well, thanks for listening to Garden Success. We look forward to having you again in future weeks as we do our shows. Remember, we're normally a call-in show.
You've been listening to Garden Success with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension horticulturist Skip Richter. Join us again next week as Skip discusses your questions about gardening and landscaping in the Brazos Valley.